I'm trying to record. Bro. Today's video is going to be 3 main parts. First, a quick recap to bring you up to speed on the story of this bike. Then I'm going to build the main wiring harness so that I can actually start and ride the bike independent of external jumper packs or really sketchy systems. And then finally, I'm going to modify my bike with cheap Chinese parts from TEMU and take it for its first proper test ride. So I found this bike by searching Facebook Marketplace for the cheapest interesting bike that I could. And I found this one, which no one else had touched because it had no wiring harness, it had no papers, there was no guarantee of if the engine was good or not. It had been on Marketplace for quite a while and the price just kept dropping and no one bought it. So naturally, I went to go look at it because I wanted myself a real challenge. And I ended up buying the bike for 7,000 Rand, which is around 300 pounds, and brought it home. Now the first issue I ran into with the bike was the fuel system. The lines had completely degraded and sent little bits of rubber into the injectors, which basically completely destroyed them. I tried to have them repaired, but it wasn't possible. So I had to get some new injectors and have those tested and cleaned so that I could just be sure that the fuel system was then good. I also obviously replaced all the lines and fittings and stuff. Next was the IVAC system. So that's basically a stepper motor with hoses, and it allows the bike to control how much air bypasses the throttle bodies. So then it can control the idle when the throttle bodies are closed. And between these two things, I ended up getting it running at the end of the last episode. But it's still a long way away from being fully licensed and back on the road again. So let's start by putting a battery in and then building some of the basic harness that goes around that. I'm going through the process of trying to find somewhere to mount the battery, and inside here I've made myself a little bracket which basically bolts on there to those 2 grounding points, and then it's got a little thing that stabilizes it against this point here. And I think I'm just going to strap the battery to that. Put the battery in. Hopefully the fuel tank fits in there. So I've tried to wrap this thing in foam. I think it may still fit. But now this return fuel line is kinked. That shouldn't be a problem because that's on the return. The fuel getting to the fuel rail here is still completely fine. Okay, but with all of this foam here, there is approximately 0 clearance between the tank and the battery. Alright, I went out and I got slightly thinner foam. It's not that much thinner, but it has made a difference because it's a bit softer. It like compresses more. So the fuel line is about the same amount of kinked, but it looks like these two aren't interfering so much anymore. So I'm gonna strap this down and use it for now. So here I have some subframe brackets that I've welded, and that should hold that in exactly the right place so everything can still fit. And you know, aero. Test fit with the tank. I'm trying to figure out exactly where I want this pedometer. Thinking right here, just like this. After a little bit of MacGyvering, I have mounted the clock. It is not going to stay like this permanently. I wanted a much more downwards angle, but for now this is fine. Here are my final brackets finished up to hold the back of the bike on. Yeah, obviously some product testing will need to be done, but I'm pretty confident in these, if I'm being honest. So I've got my shiny new brackets on. And now pretty much like the feeling is here. I don't like my dash though. My dash really sucks. It definitely needs to be pointed more at me. I'm sitting very far away. Like this tank is ginormous. Like it's actually huge. Oh my soul, there's so many wires. Okay, as always, wiring is much of a pain, but we've made some progress. We've got the battery strapped in there, padded with all that neoprene. I've got my starter solenoid, which I found a little space for up here. It's currently mounted with zip ties, but I'll probably neaten that up. And she's got foam above this little ridge here, so it can't really go anywhere. Fits nicely in that little gap. Up by the headstock here, we do have the wheel speed sensor hooked up. That comes to a bit of a dead end here. Just have to hook up, yeah, those 16 wires and then the starting mechanism, and then we should be good. Okay, I finished the rest of the wires into the ECU and into the harness. Now I just have 2 wires that are for the constant power and the temporary power into the speedometer. And I have 5 wires coming from the harness, which are for the injector power and fuel pump power. And then the other 2 I think are switches. Then I still need to take this one here. This is for the key. I will put a different connector on there and take that into down, following the channel into the fuse box. This seems to be my line of main harness at the moment, which I quite like. It's very neat. And I don't want to get any wires around this because obviously that can get tangled and get the throttle stack open. So it's just this one big sheathed wire, which is the main power to the starter relay, which is over there. And then that connector there is going to connect in, and it's going to take the cables into the main harness. So this is the fuse box, and I'm busy rewiring it because I need some specific designs. This cable comes from the rectifier, and that's the TEMU's fuse into this power splice. And this is going to connect to the battery, which is already fused before it comes in here. And then this also connects to the power splice. And then all the wires link onto it as it comes past. All right, there we have the finished product for the first half of the fuse box. That big splice in there is electrical tape on the inside, and then I just wrapped it with this over the outside to make sure nothing can go wrong. This is the last screw over here to attach the negative terminal of the battery to the harness. I've got my dad sitting over here, happens to be in the area, supervising.
No, admiring.
I'm going to connect it and then turn the key and see if she actually does what a bike's meant to do. Okay, I suppose if I connect this and nothing sparks, that's a good start. Hey, nothing sparks. Don't smell anything burning. Then when I flick this, power. And neutral indicator is working. Low fuel light is working, which should always just say low fuel light. I have no oil pressure and I have a check engine light. That's a big surprise. It looks like everything's working.
Cool.
So now we just put fuel in. This needs to screw onto that bottom one. I unscrewed there, but I have to keep it tilted because otherwise it leaks a bit of fuel.
There.
Yeah.
Yes, but using a shifter for this, is it like using a fixing crowbar to pick your nose?
No, there's no front brakes whatsoever. There's no fluid in there. Okay, everything is connected now. She should start under her own power and be able to ride very slowly up and down the road.
Sounds very promising.
Well, it's pumping. Just priming it to get enough fuel in the rail. You ready, Dad?
Ready.
You're gonna get deaf sitting there.
Why is the ref so high?
The idle's a bit messed up. Okay, so I just got to turn that down a notch. It wasn't idling properly, so I turned up the idle and obviously went too far with it. All right, tomorrow morning I will wake up all the neighbors and ride it up and down the parking lot. Mark my words. In here, this screw is the throttle adjustment screw, and it's got a little nut that keeps it in place. Unfortunately, do not have the correct thing, so I'll just have to tighten it by fingers. But basically now I'm just going to start up the bike and try get it to a reasonable idle and try survive the loudness of this exhaust in the process. And let me top her up with some nice fresh water. Does not appear that's actually needed. It's actually leaking a little bit out of the drain. I'm not entirely sure where this throttle really wants to be. I am pretty convinced that the reason it's doing that is just because it doesn't have a coolant sensor and it really does not know what the temperature of the bike is. The fan's coming on, so it probably thinks it's too hot, and it's not. It's cold engine. Okay, I now have the bike over here because I want to take it outside and try go up and down. But first I want to check that the clutch actually stops the bike properly. Oh! So the bike drives, goes forward, very happy about it because I was concerned about the gearbox after that clunking noise we had in the beginning. I don't actually know what that is. I'm concerned that it keeps dying, but I'm pretty sure once I plug in a coolant sensor that'll be a lot better. Also, I think the fact that the air temperature sensor is now not connected is probably not a good thing either. I've got a coolant temperature sensor which should arrive pretty soon. Hopefully one of them work. But yeah, I'm very chuffed the bike is both on acceleration and deceleration. It feels all right. Okay, so exciting stuff. I got some new parts for the bike. I did, however, get them from TEMU. So, I have a theory about TEMU. And basically, a lot of the stuff you buy from other companies is from China. You'll have some company in a different country design the thing and then have it produced in China because it's cheaper. So all the factories in China actually know how to produce the good stuff, and they produce it outside of manufacturing for that company and then sell it without the labeling. I'm very sure that this happens frequently because there's no one really to stop them from doing it. But obviously when you buy it outside of buying it from a specific company, you don't have the same quality control measures as you do when you buy it from that company. So you obviously got to buy with some skepticism, but essentially TEMU just is a shipping company that organizes shipping from a bunch of different suppliers, wholesale suppliers in China. Obviously their advertising is phenomenal. But yeah, I've got some stuff here for the bike, and I've bought stuff from them before, which actually turned out to be quite good quality. I haven't really had any surprises with the quality. It's all been good. The packaging is just very not good. So yeah, I want to show you guys exactly what I got for very, very cheap. The first and most interesting thing I've got here is this exhaust. And you can buy exhausts like this on Facebook Marketplace from other people, just knockoff exhausts that are very cheap. And they pretty much just buy it from China and then sell it to you for more expensive. This way it gets delivered straight to my door for a lot cheaper. This I paid, I think, 300 to 400 Rand for. It's like $20. It seems like really high quality. I've seen some Austin Racing exhausts, which this is a knockoff of, out in the wild, and pretty much looks exactly the same. It's very heavy. It's got all the right sound deadening on the inside. You can see it, you can see the holes are cut properly. Like, it works. It actually works as an exhaust. It looks the same. If this thing breaks, it's not really going to hurt anyone. So that's a big thing. If you can buy something cheap that's like, doesn't really matter if it breaks, then I think it's a great buy. It also comes with like some brackets, some other things. And then I got this, which is just titanium heat wrap. It's fiberglass. It just looks like titanium color. So I checked with Triumph the price for sensors, and it is ridiculously expensive. Something like 1,000 Rand for a coolant sensor. I think it was almost 2 grand for a lambda sensor. So what I have here is just a generic 4-wire lambda sensor that should plug right into the system, which I bought for 150 Rand. The packaging is not optimal, but the sensor actually looks, it's got grease in there. It's connection secure. It's got all the wires, nice connector on the end. You can feel it's well made. It just comes in shitty packaging. Okay, so now these are coolant sensors, and I just tried my best to cross-reference and check the sizes and the resistances. So basically, the coolant sensor works by having a different resistance at different heats, and then the ECU can measure what the temperature of the coolant is. So for the Triumph, I'm aiming between 100 ohms when it's warm to about 3,000 ohms when it's cold. And if this is anywhere close to that, it should run alright. And then I can actually remap it with Tune ECU to run according to the sensor, which will be a lot cheaper considering I bought 2 sensors just in case one was not right, but they both appear to be the right size. And it's literally just this tiny little thing, and it cost 50 Rand instead of 1,000 Rand. So that's that. And then this is the most risky thing I have bought from TEMU. Because remember I said earlier about things failing not being a problem, then it's good. Well, I decided to buy brake lines, which definitely doesn't sound like a good idea. So I have the front and the rear one here because they were just cheap. And for a new brake line, it's going to cost you like 1,500 Rand for a proper braided steel brake line. This is braided steel. It's not flexible at all. It was advertised as braided steel. It looks like braided steel. The crimps on the end look really good. And this one cost me 70 Rand and this one cost me 40 Rand. The thing is, once again, the other companies buy the materials from China. The majority of the stuff comes from China anyways. It's just someone else who crimps it on. Obviously, I'm going to do some testing. I would love to take these to a track and actually see how they perform under just lots of abuse and heat. And then at least if I crash, it's not the end of the world because it's a track. And let me now just very quickly run through the rest of the thing I got. These are bar ends, which are unfortunately not going to fit my bike, but they just CNC'd and painted aluminum. They look great for just a sacrificial thing on the end of the bar. This is just some fuel hosing. If it resists fuel, then that's perfect. Here's a very cheap multimeter. It is definitely not good quality, but it was really cheap. So this is just shrink wrap and these automatic solder joints, which is great for like when you have to do a lot of small wires. I wouldn't do anything that's like a really big wire, then it's better to get a proper solder connection. These are just some indicators. I think it's cast aluminum and it's just got an indicator in it, an LED. Not complicated to make, and this is literally just crimp ends. I have not taken these out, but these look identical to all the ones I bought from Builder's Warehouse. So the coolest thing I got of all, which is these wire strippers. I have tested these, they actually work really well. It's super easy to use. It's got a little cutting thing there and crimpers on the end. The build quality seems solid, like it's quite heavy and it just works flippin' well. Okay, so now I'm going to test these coolant temperature sensors. It is 18 ambient. I actually got ChatGPT to make me a chart of what should be expected. At 20 degrees, we should see 2300 to 2600. Okay, so I'm getting 2.8 ohms. This one I'm getting 2.84 kilo ohms. So now I'm going to boil some hot water, put these two in the hot water, and then test them again. Okay, so according to my chart, at 100 degrees Celsius, the temperature of water boils, it's going to be 100 ohms. Obviously, this isn't going to be exactly 100. So I'm going to be pretty much happy with anything under 300 ohms of resistance at this temperature. That is currently at 550 and dropping incredibly fast now that's in the hot water. This is probably going to get down to the right temperature. But what I also have here is this OBD2 scanner that I borrowed from my father. So I will be able to check some very elementary data about what the bike's seeing, just temperatures and stuff. I don't know if I'll be able to see throttle position, but that's the other thing I think I may have a problem with it. When I was measuring the resistance on the TPS, I was not getting the correct values for open and closed throttle, which means the whole map is a little bit off and that definitely will cause it to run badly. I was also digging through some sensors and I managed to find this, which appears to be the lambda sensor from the old bike that fits exactly perfectly. Okay, I'm not going to actually connect them now because this one's filthy and this one's brand new. But these are an exact right match. The one slides in the other. So I should be able to just connect this to the right colored wires on the bike and that will simplify my problem of installing the sensor a lot. So naturally, as one does when you get a new thing, I cut it apart and soldered more pieces onto it. This was the old thing, but I don't have that connector and I don't actually want it sticking that far out the side of the bike. So I just cut it off because it cost 50 Rand and soldered these two pieces on. And now I've got a remote connector so that I can easily put in the harness. Got my coolant sensor in, next onto the lambda sensor. Here we go. Out with the old and in with the new. Now I have to sort out the TPS sensor over on this side. I've got my TPS sensor unplugged here, and the goal is to unloosen and adjust the sensor in here such that I get the correct resistance readings at the terminals. Okay, it's a new day. The TPS is mostly calibrated. I will have to take it out the bike at some point, but it should be fine for now. Now I'm gonna install my new brake lines from TEMU. Okay, I've got the new brake lines on here. One in the back and nice one here in the front coming down. Definitely looks much better, and we will see if they function better as well. We'll need to perform some tests, but I'm just going to bleed them now and check if everything works. Bled the brakes. This is the first time I've got stopping power in the front here, and I've also cleaned all the brake discs with brake and parts cleaner, and I have lubed the chain. Will have to be cleaned at some point. But I don't have that on me right now, so just lube the chain. I'm going to put these on and then I'm going to try ride it. Got my bike connected, busy building up a little bit of charge. Going to give it a proper jump and see what happens now. Definitely sounds a lot worse than before. Let me see if I can figure out what's going on. It is running incredibly rich with the sensor unplugged, but it was running the same with the sensor plugged, so I don't know. runs a lot better, but it's still not running quite properly. Okay, so a lot more promising than the first time, but there's still some issues to work out. It's not showing a speed, and it also seems to rev fine when in neutral, but as soon as I put it in gear and go forward, and I get on the throttle, it bogs down. Also, it's when I turn the handlebars, it sometimes cuts out at idle, so I think I may have to just loosen the throttle a little bit, and then it should be a lot better. So we'll try those things and see if it makes a difference, but not right now because I'm hungry and I want to make some breakfast. Okay, I got some Iridium spark plugs here that I just dropped into the bike. And I've got the old spark plugs I took out over here. Unfortunately, I was so excited I completely forgot to pull them. But check at this. Here I have to put my hand behind so it focuses. But this is the middle cylinder. And compare that to this. This is cylinder number 1. Now you may think this looks worse, but this is actually what it should look like because there was oil in the cylinder and it was running rich. So it should look like this. The other one makes me think that that cylinder was actually not even firing. So we'll see if the spark plug changes that fact. Hopefully it does, because you want all 3 cylinders to work. And that would explain a lot of the issues I'm having. So yeah, let's see. Unfortunately, I just forgot to film, but it was a 2-minute job. I was just too excited. Let's see what happens. Oh, my GS is such a trooper. Never fails me. Okay, let me set this up here. Okay, it doesn't look like anything is improved. Yeah, I don't know what the issue is. When I roll into the throttle, it still just bogs. And does not idle well, it keeps readjusting. But it smoked a lot when I started it. So that makes me think that maybe I swapped 2 of the ignition coils and all of a sudden 2 different cylinders were firing, and the one that previously was not working is still not working. It's not running evenly, it's running very unevenly. So yeah, more troubleshooting. It's very interesting. So before I took that video, I actually swapped the ignition coils of cylinder 2 and 1 because I noticed on the spark plugs that I took out, it looks like cylinder 2 wasn't firing. Tested it, the exhaust was not hot after I did a test just now. So, swapped the ignition coil, it's got a new spark plug, so that's not the issue. And it's still not firing on the cylinder 2. So I'm going to check if it's getting fuel, but I'm pretty sure it's getting fuel because the exhaust, when you rev it, smokes like black, which is what unburned fuel looks like coming out the engine. So I'm pretty sure that fuel is getting cycled and then going into the hot exhaust and burning up. I'm really confident that it's just an electrical issue. So I'm going to test it right now. I finally got it to run on 3 cylinders. It turns out that after all my problems, I never properly connected the second fuel injector. Like, that was my only issue. The fuel injector was not completely connected, so I was running on 2 cylinders. I also got my first noise complaint because I've been making a racket here for the last 2 hours, and someone came out and just, yeah, they weren't too happy. But anyways, I got it running. Freaking cool. Freaking cool. I'm happy now. I'm happy. Okay, moving on to electrics. I have taken apart this handle since it's just a combination of switches. And I've added that little red thing in there, which basically means when you switch, when you turn on the high beams, the low beams don't get disconnected. They stay on, which is essential for the wiring I want to do. And then I've also separated the pass power. So normally it would have just activated the high beams, but now it's actually a separate channel that comes out. So I can do some cool stuff with the lights. And then over on this side, I've fixed up the indicator switch so that it actually works nicely now. Yeah, I'm just gonna throw this on the bike. And then what I've done on the bike side here, I've taken the tank off, and now I've just been laying a lot of the foundations for the wiring. And then I've hooked up here these daytime running lights and hazards, because originally the bike doesn't have hazards, but I want them. So it's just these LED strips on the front and then on the back down here. And they also double as daytime running lights, which you'll see when I switch on. They do a little startup animation. Then I also hooked up this other feature. It's not able to start in neutral. You see I can press this and it does nothing because this blue wire here, the ground, goes to the same ground as the neutral light on the dash. But the problem I had there was it was back powering, so I put in this thing over here called a diode, which is basically a one-way valve for electricity, and it just means that no electricity can go back up here through the coil and then do funky stuff with the electronics. Now the other thing that's quite cool, so you've got a 5-pin relay that acts as the cutout relay, so when you trigger the ignition that flips over and it takes away power from all the lights. But you also have the option to send that power somewhere, which most bikes just don't do, but I've opted to send it somewhere. But I'll show you now, because the bike's not in neutral, it won't start. But something cool will happen. If I press the starter button, the hazards start to go. A useless feature, but it's just kind of cool. When I start the bike, the hazards go off. So yeah, and I'm just gonna keep doing the fine little bits of the main harness, so that everything I just have to do up by the headstock. And I also have to get some brake switches, because it appears that both this brake switch and the one here are both broken. Okay, I've been slowly grinding away at the wiring here. So we got the startup lights, and then when the bike's on, you can indicate, and it actually comes through on the front and on the back tail light there. Same for both sides. And then I found a way with diodes to make this still work, except the tail light is solid, which is fine. But that works even when the bike is off, which I think is quite nifty. So I can leave the bike with the hazards on, draws very little current, and it'll be safe. And then I have just connected the airbox and sealed off everything. I put some silicone hose around the idle air control valve, so it just seals a bit better. Hopefully that'll actually get it to run properly now. And then yeah, I'm just gonna put the fuel tank on, get some padding going around here for the fuel tank so it sits nicely, and then connect all back up again. That's how it's meant to sound. The left cylinder is still not firing. I don't know why. This is weird because I switched the injectors around now, so it's not the injectors. It means it would have to be the coil. But that's weird. Why is it suddenly misfiring on the coil? There's new spark plugs. Okay, I'm running into a slight problem. And that problem is, every time that something goes wrong on the bike, I get so excited to try and fix it that I forget to film. So, what has happened now is I noticed the fuel line was not completely connected. It was already primed by that point, and then I touched it and it came off. So that prompted me to take that apart, and what I found was that the diameter was a bit different, so I put a other fuel hose inside of the one fuel hose I had, but that wasn't the correct type of hose. It actually wasn't a fuel hose, so it degraded, and some of that broke all the way into the pipe. So I've just spent the last 20 minutes taking apart the fuel system and cleaning again, but hopefully it should work now. Okay. She's idling. She's learning how to behave with the new tubes I put in. It's good. You think so?
You idiot.
No.
Yes, you did.
Only by accident.
It's not wheelie ready yet. Not yet.
Okay.